Over the course of this project, I have gained a whole new respect and perspective on the migration industry, how far it has come, how it runs, and how truly complex it is. I have tried to make some recommendations that may be feasible and could spark conversation to the best of my abilities, while remaining sensitive to those complexities, and hope to keep exploring these issues in the future. As history has shown throughout this project, migration has not always been organized. And in fact, today isn't perfect either. Today, however, there is a greater and more organized effort to make sure relocation is adequate. There are homes, services, and hopefully jobs. While the conditions in the historic case are different and the animosity is not there, the relocation factor and its organization are. Thankfully, the world has learned from the past, and an effort has been made to improve systems of movement for refugees, and while at times there may be too many people than the system can handle, it is certainly a major improvement from people arriving extremely unhealthy or dead. If there were a bar to set, the minimum would be alive. The current networks go beyond that and work their best to ensure that people are healthy and hopefully not abused. History has also shown how truly resilient and remarkable people can be even under dire situations. Today, that is no different. Refugees bring with them unique skills and opportunity to nations they arrive in. The question becomes, how are they received? That drives their ability to thrive and contribute to the new society. I won't bore you with a ton of figures, but know that the average refugee in the United States is much higher of an economic contributor than they ever were a drain. In Germany, they've got a program that trains refugees as bus drivers for the municipal transportation system of Berlin, allowing them to interact with native people, and maybe more importantly, allowing native people to interact with them. Turkey has seen millions of dollars contributed by refugees to its economy. History has shown how critical housing is to people's ability to develop and live, to contribute to the society where they are placed. The German expulsions showed a horrific example of poorly planned and executed attempts to house masses of people in a country that had been all but obliterated. Fast forward to today, and while there are certainly some faults, there are so many more good examples of adequate or even excellent living conditions. Even the least advanced of today's refugee camps are better than the resettlement procedures and places post-World War II for the expellees. Now, that's just adequate when considering that there's places for refugees among urban populations in apartments, homes, and other rentals. There's been so much learned, and while there's flaws, there's no such thing as perfect. And, as I stated earlier, as long as you're doing your best, you're doing your part. The main research question for this assignment was, how do the German expulsions and Syrian refugee crisis seem similar and different? How do the conditions affect people's ability to resettle? And how do refugees contribute to the place they move? Throughout this project, a plethora of conclusions and lessons have surfaced. The importance of the international community in this, and the importance of continued international support and presence in efforts to alleviate human suffering. These are immensely important efforts, and the global visibility of peoples and crises creates a call for action and attention. It's like a team game. The more players join your team, the more equal the division of effort. Looking back, a lesson that could be learned from Syria and from Germany are that one nation cannot do it alone. Germany could not house the mass of expellees, and the Allied government that was set up could not adequately plan for them. Jordan, Turkey, and Lebanon all have tried and are still trying their best to help the people in need. Once their efforts were backed by international support, though, conditions began improving significantly for the refugees, and in the case of Lebanon, for all vulnerable groups. Refugees are an extremely capable group of people who can contribute to the economy in immense ways. Contrary to some beliefs, refugees are not drains on the system. They need a little help when they first arrive, but after a few years, they contribute to the economy more than they ever drained. They send their children to schools and try to integrate into society, and then their children become economic contributors as well as their parents. Some refugees choose to leave, some choose to stay. Those who stay and put down permanent roots not only contribute economically, but also socially to the fabric of the new nation that they call home. Refugees can also bring unique skills or needed skills, such as metalworking, as in Turkey. The major takeaway from this lesson is that refugees help the economic development of a nation by contributing to it economically, also by opening up trade options for when the situation that displaced them subsides. Refugees have knowledge of the market needs of their home countries, and those who choose to stay may contribute that knowledge to the society they live in and open that market up more. Conversely, there is also the chance that those who leave bring with them the knowledge of the country that was hosting them, and use that knowledge to set up businesses that facilitate trade in one way or another with the ex-host country, thus helping to open up more international networks. Refugees are in most cases legal migrants. No, they did not hop a border somewhere, and if they did, they're working through a legal system to claim asylum and be recognized as a refugee. They are fleeing their countries of origin in search of safety. The international community proper recognizes this to a large degree. However, people do not always recognize this. Yet, refugees share similar views as many native-born populations on issues in the country that they come to reside in once they've begun learning about them. This lesson is to not necessarily love everyone in the world, but learn and understand. Take a moment and try to comprehend the issues at hand, and not immediately perceive someone negatively because of the conditions that caused them to move. Perception really matters in the case of acclimation and integration into the host country for refugees. Tensions create problems and hinder the abilities of refugees to contribute meaningfully to society like they want to. Take the case of Jordan. Once the work restrictions were lifted, Syrians began to become economic contributors and helped the markets in the country. Or the case of Turkey. Again, Syrians contribute a huge amount, and while there have been some tensions, work was never restricted, and for the most part, there's been relative peace. Of course, with takeaways, there's some ideas too. First, I can't criticize the migration industry in terms of contribution once they're aware. The international community contributes a decent bit once awareness is there. A system, or some better method than placing people in camps and showing it to the world so they understand there's a crisis, would be ideal, though. Some way for documentation to be made and tracked, such as registration permits that are issued and shown to the UNHCR to allow for publicization of the issue and raise international awareness before situations become desperate, would be ideal. Second, I will criticize the international community for its slower response, and a serious imbalance of responsibility sharing. There's no clear good method for how to let people into a country, or how to move people to a country. But there is a clear need for the people who are displaced to be shared more equally among the world. Over 4 million in 3 nearby countries? There must be a better solution than that. In Lebanon, the influx was so great that there was a fear of a political interest shift. This burden needs to be split more adequately between the nations who can take people in. Third, safety. This is a big issue because while the voyage is safer today for refugees than it has been previously, it's still not perfect. There are situations in the Aegean Sea where people die, search parties hover, and are sent out to search for people who have disappeared into the waves. There is a clear need for more formalized ways to cross the Aegean than rafts. But this issue runs in tandem with the fourth issue, which is transitional housing. Again, I cannot and will not say there is a perfect answer. There is never a silver bullet, but there's always room for improvement. There's no need for camps to be getting so large that they're more populous than towns, unless they were intended to be a fully fledged, semi-permanent town, which, by the way, is a pretty good idea as long as there is service delivery in good conditions. My recommendation for this issue is that in major points of exit and transit to other nations, there should be formal ways for people to get there, even without documentation, because in some cases people may simply not have access to it due to their condition prior to fleeing. As long as someone registers once they get to their destination, they can be helped and should be helped. Perhaps the creation of these formal networks of transit, as well as more semi-permanent towns and or camps, would be a good solution to these two issues. But why make more of these large town settlements? Why not just let people in and disperse them rapidly? That harkens back to the need for adequate resettlement. It's better to make sure someone is resettled in an area where they'll have a chance to thrive and contribute to the development of society, as opposed to just plopped somewhere at random. Reflection. A collection of thoughts on this project. A brief introduction and background on my involvement. Hello, my name is Tim Leiser. I'm a very good friend of Chris, and have been for several years now, and upon learning he needed some assistance with a college project involving voice work, well, needless to say, I couldn't exactly say no, especially being an aspiring voice actor. So I accepted the task given, and that was, well, what you've watched and or listened to for these past few videos. And while most would say it's been a waste of time, I'm honestly the opposite. I'm grateful for the chance to do all this, and I hope you enjoyed it as much as I've enjoyed doing it. So thank you, Chris, for allowing me to assist you in this endeavor of yours, even if I was a bit late and nearly missed some deadlines of ours. I'm grateful to have helped you, bud, and look forward to assisting more in the future. What I've learned. The hardships of the German people, post-World War II. I am indeed of German descent. Although I'm mostly Irish, and throughout this project with all that I had to read over, and in some cases read over multiple times to get the pronunciation right on certain words, all I can say is, we had it hard after World War II. What were they thinking back then? That half of what they implemented would work? I'm glad to have not been around back then, because there's only one word I can use to describe their conditions and living arrangements. Atrocious. I also learned, of course, that with little to no knowledge of the German language, and merely going off of what little I do know, I'd say I personally nailed the pronunciations of the various wording and phrasing throughout these scripts, even if I never took a German class in my life thus far. To conclude this segment, I shall state my thoughts in the aforementioned language. A translation will be put up by Chris in editing for those who don't understand. Dachten wir damals überhaupt mit dem Kopf? Basierend auf der Anzahl der Toten und der Sorte, würde ich nicht sagen. What I've learned. The ongoing struggles of the Syrian people throughout the world. Oh, you thought the Germans had it the hardest with their predicament? With what I've learned on the modern-day situation involving the Syrians, sure, the Germans had it hard for their respective time period. But comparing that to today, the different policies, compacts, and the sort to try to alleviate their suffering is all appreciated, even if the damage has been done, and will take a long while to be repaired, both for the people affected and the world as a whole. When it comes down to the questions of similarities on both situations, there are countless, even if separated by several decades. The hardships to fit into a society that has seemingly rejected them, pushing through all the negativity to place themselves in a better situation for themselves and their families, even in the face of poverty and disease. Conclusions. Overall thoughts and final remarks in regards to the project. Well, if I had to say anything to sum up the entirety of this series of informative videos, it would basically be in one full sentence. How did we manage to get it this bad? And for so long? Where did the downward spiral begin, both internally with governmental bodies and practices of said bodies, and externally with how we've overall handled the refugees from either era? While that question may not be answered anytime soon, I have a bigger question, and of course myself and Chris hope to hear from you on this matter. Food for thought. How could the issue of transportation of people be solved? Is there a way to make sure people are safely fleeing from the danger that caused them to flee? I've proposed a potential solution, but there could be many more. What of perceptions? How do you view refugees? Has this video series perhaps helped give you, as viewers, something to think about in this regard? How can we best integrate refugees? Does putting them in public sector, people-oriented jobs help them integrate? What about jobs and industry? Could we give opportunities for refugees to use their unique skills more often? And if so, how? How about housing? We've seen the importance of adequate conditions on health, but it also affects integration of people. If you're worried about your roof collapsing, you're probably not all that social. Is it better to house refugees in cities, or maybe make settlements with more permanence for them that have services? I'm not totally sure on the answer to this. There's upsides and downsides. Perhaps there's other solutions as well? Do you see the similarities and the growth of the migration industry? It's moving in the right direction, and over time, will continue to get better. How can the average person play a role in helping refugees? What can one person do? Raise awareness? Befriend or at least treat with kindness refugees? What can you, as a person, do to help another who may be lost in a new country?